You don't often expect the Environmental Protection Agency to be involved in action many believe would hurt the environment. Well, today, though, EPA Chief Scott Pruitt signed a proposed rule to begin withdrawing from the so-called Clean Power Plan, President Obama's policy for cutting greenhouse gas emissions from power plants. Now, that move grabbed a lot of attention, but there's something else Mr. Pruitt's done that slipped under the radar, a decision to lift the protections of a pristine area in Alaska that could pave the way for a massive new mine there, a mine that could threaten a wild salmon fishery called the most valuable in the world. Pruitt made the decision after meeting with a mining executive. Tonight, we have exclusive new details on how that meeting took place and what's at stake. Here's CNN's chief investigative correspondent, Drew Griffin.
The meeting at EPA headquarters was brief and to the point. By the time it ended, a mining company hoping to dig for gold and copper got just what it wanted. On Monday, May 1st, the CEO of Pebble Limited Partnership asked newly appointed EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt to withdraw environmental restrictions on Alaska's Bristol Bay. They were put there by the Obama administration to stop that company from building a massive mine. Pruitt quickly agreed. At 10:36 a.m. Eastern, little more than an hour after Pruitt met with the mining CEO, EPA staffers were shocked to receive this email, obtained exclusively by CNN, which says, "We have been directed by the administrator to withdraw the restrictions." The proposed protection of that pristine area was being removed. Pruitt opened the door for what the EPA feared could become one of the largest open-pit mines in the world in an extremely sensitive watershed in wild Alaska. What's more, according to multiple sources, he made that decision without a briefing from any of EPA's scientists or experts.
Absolutely. I met with Mr. Pruitt.
For Pebble Limited Partnership CEO Tom Collier, it was a huge win, and it comes with no apologies.
And do you think it was not wrong that Mr. Pruitt did not even look at what the work had been done?
Not a science decision. It's a process decision.
You know, the optics on this look...
The optics on this are right. They don't look bad a bit.
Bad. This looks like a head of a gold mine went into the new administrator and got him to reverse what an entire department had worked on for years.
Then put your glasses back on, because you're not seeing the right optics.
The Obama EPA protection, detailed in hundreds of pages of reports, is called a Clean Water Act designation. So rare, it's only happened like this one other time in the EPA's history. It was put on Bristol Bay, Alaska, specifically to stop Pebble Mine even before its owners applied for a permit. The mining company sued the EPA, saying it wasn't treated fairly. And the same morning Pruitt met with the mining company, he also agreed to settle that lawsuit as well. To understand the significance of Pruitt's decisions that day, you must first understand why the protection was placed on Bristol Bay in the first place. Bristol Bay and its tributaries are home to one of the world's largest and most pristine sockeye salmon fisheries. Roughly half the world's wild sockeye salmon come from here. This watershed is among the last places on Earth like this, an intact ecosystem supporting about 50 million wild salmon, part of life for indigenous cultures that stretch back 4,000 years. In 2011, Pebble Partnership's owner, Canadian mining company Northern Dynasty Minerals, filed a mine-building assessment with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. The mine could potentially create a footprint bigger than the island of Manhattan and nearly as deep as the Grand Canyon, according to the EPA. Alarm bells went off, and local tribes and fisheries asked the EPA to study the potential impacts a mine that big could have. After a 3-year study, the EPA published a report showing pollution from the mine would result in complete loss of fish habitat, with the potential to destroy 94 miles of streams and tributaries and an additional 4,900 acres above Bristol Bay. The EPA said all these losses would be irreversible. The fishing industry here employs 14,000 people. No one knows how many jobs would be lost if the fish vanished.
It's a uniquely bad place geologically to put this kind of thing. Protecting it works, patching it together afterwards doesn't work.
One of the scientists whose work was used in that study is Thomas Quinn, a professor of fisheries at the University of Washington. He has studied the area for 30 years.
This is the jewel in the crown of America's fisheries resources in salmon. If you don't think this is worth saving, what is? And if you don't think there's danger in this, you simply haven't looked at it carefully.
According to several EPA insiders, a briefing book being prepared for Scott Pruitt wasn't even finished when Pruitt had made his decision. The scientists never got the chance to brief the administrator. Unbeknownst to many at the EPA, lobbyists for the mine had already been lobbying to overturn their work, lobbying Trump's EPA transition team even before Scott Pruitt was sworn in.
But it sounds like you do have a friend in the administrator. After a half hour, without apparently looking at any of the science, he said, yeah, we're going to remove this proposed determination.
The premise of your question offends me.
Because?
Because I don't have a friend at EPA. What I've got is somebody who's following the damn law for the first time, okay? That's not a friend. And the issue was not a scientific issue. The issue was a due process issue.
Former EPA Director Gina McCarthy disputes that. Everything about Bristol Bay and the clean water protection was based on science, she says. Decades of scientific research, years of study and public comment through the EPA's due process. It is why she officially approved the protection. And like many at the EPA, is stunned it all could be so easily undone at the bidding of a mining company.
This wasn't about EPA taking an extraordinary proactive step on its own. It was really about using a tool to provide certainty to those Alaskan Native villages and all those people that rely on that resource for their jobs and the economy, that we were being protective of that ecological resource.
It, by our reporting, took one election and 1 half-hour meeting to overturn everything you did.
Yeah. Well, I spent a whole lot more time on it than that, and it is a very big decision and one that deserved really thoughtful discussion between the career and political staff.
Scott Pruitt declined CNN's request for an interview, but in a statement, an EPA spokesperson tells CNN the meeting with the mining company was an opportunity for Administrator Pruitt to let Pebble Limited Partnership know that they are simply being granted a fair opportunity to apply to build the mine, and adds Scott Pruitt did not prejudge the outcome of the process, nor make any assurances about the final decision. The statement goes on to say EPA's review will be based on the whole record, all the science, and an actual proposal from the company.
But he made that decision, right, after a half-hour meeting with the head of a guy who wants to mine gold in an area that many scientists believe will destroy one of the most pristine sockeye salmon spawning grounds in the whole world. What am I missing?
What you're missing is if they're right, then we won't get a permit.
Pebble just last week posted this document on its website touting a new path forward, saying the mine will be much smaller, have less impact, and that its policy is to work in a safe, environmentally responsible manner.
You know that mining is a dirty business no matter how you get around it.
I don't buy that for a second.
Are you telling me you're going to be able to put a clean mine up there that's going to have no effect on anybody's habitat?
Exactly.
And if they get the permit and the mine gets built,
I'd find that a horrifying prospect. Take the place in the world that you know best and you value most, the most beautiful, most productive, the most special place you can conceive, and then think of the most devastating thing that you could do to that place. You would be horrified just as I am.
Drew joins us now. What's the reaction been to all of this?
Well, quite frankly, Anderson, it has been outrage. Tomorrow and Thursday, the EPA is going to hold public hearings in Alaska on this change of plans. We've heard from several groups that are planning protests. The United Tribes of Bristol Bay, they represent several of the indigenous tribes up there. They're going to flood the meetings. We've also heard from the fisheries industry. They too plan to voice outrage, but it seems like this is a done deal. Again, with almost no discussions, the mining company CEO told us he is going to plan to have his proposal in place for a Pebble mine submitted this December. Anderson.
Drew Griffin, I appreciate the reporting. Thanks. Up next, breaking